The massive space station hung in the darkness like a silver crown. It was the council chamber, home to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Today, 12 different alien races had come together for one purpose. They wanted to end the human problem forever. Ambassador Zextai of the Zilithian Empire stood at his speaking platform. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights. His forearms moved as he talked, making grand gestures to show how important his words were. "Fellow council members," he said in his deep voice, "today we write history. Today we remove the chaos that has plagued our galaxy for too long." Around the great circular chamber, representatives from 11 other species nodded their agreement. The snake-like Mortaxi coiled their long bodies tighter. The crystal beings called Vorthak chimed in. Harmony. The massive Gorloths stomped their feet on the metal floor, making the whole station shake. Only one voice had stayed quiet during the long debate. Ambassador Kethver of the Phylorian Republic sat in his chair, his gray skin darker than usual. His large black eyes watched the proceedings with growing worry. Something about this felt wrong, but he could not put his finger on what it was. On the main viewing screen, the last human fleet limped through space. 37 ships, all badly damaged from the final battle at Terra Nova. Smoke poured from broken hulls. Some ships moved slowly, their engines barely working. These were the survivors of humanity's once mighty space navy. "Look at them," Zextai continued, pointing at the screen with one of his four hands. "See how they run like wounded animals. They know they have lost. They know their time in this galaxy is over." The human fleet moved toward the edge of known space, toward the great void that lay beyond the outer rim. No one knew what existed out there in the dark. Most species were too afraid to find out. But the humans had agreed to go there. They had agreed to leave and never come back. General Thokmar of the Gorloth Defense Force stepped forward. His massive frame cast shadows across the chamber floor. "The humans fought well," he admitted, his voice like rocks grinding together. "But they fought without honor. They used tricks, they broke the rules of war." "Exactly," said High Priestess Velshin of the Mortaxi Collective. Her serpentine body swayed as she spoke. "Humans do not understand order. They do not respect tradition. They bring chaos wherever they go." Kethver remembered the battles differently. Yes, humans had used unusual tactics. They had attacked when they should have defended. They had retreated when they should have attacked. They had made alliances with pirates and rebels. But they had also saved millions of lives on Kepler Prime when the void storms hit. They had shared their medical knowledge freely. They had helped terraforming projects on dozens of worlds. "The exile decree is ready for signatures," announced the council secretary, a small being whose species no one could remember the name. "Oh?" The document appeared on screens throughout the chamber, written in 12 different languages. The decree was simple, but final. Humanity was banned from the galaxy. They could never return to any council world. They could never contact any council species. If any human ship was found within the borders of civilized space, it would be destroyed without warning. One by one, the ambassador signed the decree. The Zilithians signed with flourish, using golden ink that glowed under the lights. The Mortaxi signed with precision, their marks forming perfect geometric patterns. The Gorloths simply pressed their massive thumbs onto the document, leaving permanent indentations in the metal surface. When it came to Kethver's turn, he hesitated. His pale hand hovered over the signature pad for a long moment. Around him, the other ambassadors waited. He could feel their eyes on him, judging his delay. "Is there a problem, Ambassador?" Zextai asked, his voice carrying a hint of threat. Kethver looked at the viewing screen again. The human fleet had almost reached the edge of the system. Soon, they would activate their faster-than-light drives and disappear into the unknown. Part of him wanted to call out, to tell them to wait, but he knew it would do no good. The decision had already been made. "No problem," he said quietly, and signed. His name. The chamber erupted in celebration. The Zilithians began their victory song, a haunting melody that spoke of conquered enemies and expanded borders. The Mortaxi performed their ritual dance of triumph, their long bodies weaving complex patterns in the air. The Gorloth beat their chests and roared with joy. On the screen, the human fleet began to glow with the light of charging jump drives. Admiral Sarah Chun, the last human commander, had sent a final message to the Council an hour ago. It had been short and simple. We go in peace. We wish you well. There had been no threats, no promises of revenge, no dramatic speeches about returning one day. Just a simple goodbye from a species that had once controlled a quarter of the galaxy. Kethver found this more disturbing than any threat would have been. The jump drives activated. One by one, the human ships stretched into lines of light and vanished. In seconds they were gone, leaving only empty space and the distant glow of stars. The celebration in the chamber grew louder. Someone had brought out Zilithian victory wine, a purple liquid that sparkled and changed color as you drank it. Ambassadors who had been enemies for centuries now toasted together, united in their triumph over humanity. To order, shouted General Thokmer, raising his massive cup. To tradition, called High Priestess Velshin. To a galaxy free of chaos, declared Zextai. They all drank deeply, but Kethver only pretended to sip his wine. He kept watching the empty space where the human fleet had been. Something nagged at him, a feeling he could not shake. The humans had fought for 50 years. They had won impossible victories against overwhelming odds. They had survived attacks that should have destroyed them completely. They had adapted to every strategy the Council had used against them. And now they had simply left. No last desperate attack on the Council station, no attempt to take hostages or demand better terms. They had accepted exile to the void as if it meant nothing to them, as if they had been planning for it all along. Admiral Chun's final words echoed in Kethver's mind. We go in peace. We wish you well. Most species would have been broken by such a defeat. They would have begged for mercy or sworn eternal vengeance. But the humans had simply wished them well and walked away into the darkness. What kind of species did that? What kind of people accepted the impossible and made it look easy? As the celebration continued around him, Kethver stared at the empty space on the viewing screen and wondered if they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 5 years had passed since the humans disappeared into the void, and the galaxy had never been more peaceful. Trade routes flowed smoothly between worlds. Disputes were settled through proper diplomatic channels. Wars became rare, and when they did happen, they followed all the ancient rules of engagement. Ambassador Kethver stood in his office, looking out at the busy spaceport through the large windows. Ships came and went in perfect order, following traffic patterns that had not changed in decades. Everything moved according to schedule. Everything was predictable. He should have been happy. This was what the Council had wanted. But something felt wrong. The door chimed, and his assistant entered. Sir, the monthly trade reports are ready for your review. Kethver took the data pad and scanned through the numbers. Profits were up across all sectors. The Zilithian Empire had expanded into 3 new systems, all former human colonies. The Mortaxi Collective had built 17 new manufacturing centers. Even the Gorloth had started a mining operation that was actually making money. Everything looks good, he told his assistant. Very stable. That word stuck in his mind after his assistant left. Stable. That was exactly what everything had become. Stable, predictable, and somehow empty. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Vexahan of the Mortaxi Research Division was having similar thoughts. She coiled her long body around her workstation, studying the latest scientific reports. The numbers were impressive. 12 new technologies had been developed this year. 4 new medicines had been approved. 3 star systems had been successfully TERRAFORMED. All very good results. All very ordinary. Dr. Vexahan remembered working with human scientists before the war. They had been frustrating partners. They asked too many questions. They tried experiments that should not have worked. They mixed different fields of study in ways that made no sense, but somehow they had always surprised her. A human biologist would suddenly solve an engineering problem. A human physicist would find a new way to improve medicine. They had ideas that came from nowhere and worked for reasons no one understood. Now her research moved forward at a steady pace. Every problem was solved through proper procedures. Every discovery followed logical steps from the previous one. Progress was predictable and measurable. It was also boring. On the military space station that orbited Zilithian Prime, General Thokmor reviewed the latest security reports. Crime was at an all-time low. Pirate attacks had become so rare that patrol schedules had been reduced. The few criminal groups that remained followed predictable patterns that made them easy to catch. He should have been proud. The Gorloth Defense Force had achieved perfect order throughout their territory. But General Thokmor found himself missing. The chaos of the old days, when humans had been in the galaxy, pirates had been clever and unpredictable. They had used strange tactics that forced military commanders to think quickly and adapt. Every battle had been different. Every enemy had brought new challenges. Now, the few remaining pirates attacked the same way every time. They targeted the same types of ships. They used the same escape routes. Catching them had become a routine job that any junior officer could handle. The general's aide knocked on his door. "Sir, the monthly patrol reports." General Thokmor barely looked at them. "Any surprises?" "No, sir. Everything went according to plan." After the aide left, General Thokmor stared out the window at the peaceful stars. He had fought humans for 20 years of his career. They had been the most difficult enemy he had ever faced. They had attacked when they should have defended. They had retreated when they should have advanced. They had won battles they should have lost, and lost battles they should have won. Fighting them had been like fighting the wind itself. Impossible to predict. Impossible to prepare for, but it had made him a better general. Every human battle had taught him something new. Every defeat had forced him to improve. Every victory had shown him that there was always another way to think about warfare. Now his job was so easy it felt pointless. High Priestess Velshun of the Mortaxi Collective faced a different kind of emptiness. Her people were artists as well as philosophers. They created beautiful sculptures and wrote complex poetry. Their culture was based on finding perfect harmony between order and beauty, but lately their art had become repetitive. The same themes appeared over and over. The same styles were used again and again. Nothing felt fresh or surprising. She remembered the human art that had once filled the cultural databases. Strange paintings that mixed different styles. Music that broke traditional rules. Stories that ended in unexpected ways. Most of it had been confusing to Mortaxi sensibilities. Some of it had been disturbing, but it had also been alive with possibility, human. Artists had taken Mortaxi classical forms and changed them in ways that should not have worked. They had combined Zilithian epic poetry with Gorloth warrior songs. They had created fusion art that no single species would have thought to attempt. The results had often been messy. Sometimes they had been failures. But occasionally they had been brilliant in ways that took her breath away. Now the cultural databases contained only traditional works from each species. Everything was pure and proper and completely separate. There was no mixing, no experimentation. No chaos. There was also no growth. On the distant world of Kepler 7, a former human colony, Zilithian Administrator Hextall managed the mining operations with perfect efficiency. The quotas were met every month. The workers were healthy and well-fed. The environment was protected according to all council regulations, but something was missing from the colony. The humans had left behind empty buildings and abandoned equipment. More importantly, they had left behind a feeling that Administrator Hextall could not quite describe. The human colonists had built things that made no sense from an engineering perspective. Gardens in impossible places. Sculptures made from mining waste. Meeting halls with acoustic properties that were somehow perfect for both Zilithian speeches and human music. They had taken a standard mining colony and turned it into something that felt like home. Now it was just a mining colony again. Efficient and profitable and completely without character, Administrator Hextall walked through the empty human quarters sometimes, trying to understand what had made this place special. The rooms were the right size and shape. The furniture was functional. Everything was properly organized, but the walls were bare. There were no personal touches. No signs that anyone had ever lived here and made it their own. The humans had taken something with them when they left. Something that could not be measured or replaced. Back on the council station, Ambassador Kethver met with the other representatives for their monthly review. The reports were all positive. Every species was prospering. Every world was peaceful. Every goal was being achieved. Outstanding results, declared Zextai, his forearms spreading wide with satisfaction. The galaxy runs like a perfect machine. Order has been restored, agreed High Priestess Velshin. Chaos has been eliminated. Our military forces are unchallenged, reported General Folkmer. Peace reigns supreme. All around the chamber, representatives nodded and smiled. The great experiment had worked. Removing humans from the galaxy had created the perfect civilization, but Kethver noticed something in their faces. Behind the smiles, there was an emptiness, a hunger that none of them wanted to admit. They had achieved everything they had wanted. They had perfect order, perfect peace, perfect predictability. So why did it feel like they had lost something important? That night, Kethver stood alone in his quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere beyond the outer rim, in the vast darkness that no council ship had ever explored, the humans were building a new life for themselves. What were they doing out there? What kind of civilization were they creating in the void? For the first time since the exile, Kethver found himself wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. They had won the war against chaos, but had they lost something more valuable in the process? The emergency alarm screamed through the council station at exactly 0347 Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Kethver jerked awake in his quarters, his heart racing. In his 5 decades of service, the emergency alarm had only sounded 3 times. Each time had meant that something terrible was happening. He grabbed his communicator and contacted the Central Command Center. "This is Ambassador Kethver. What is the situation?" The voice that answered was shaking with fear. "Sir, we are receiving a distress signal from the Kepler Mining Collective. Multiple stations have gone dark. We have lost contact with 17 mining platforms and 4 defense ships." Kethver felt ice form in his stomach. The Kepler Mining Collective was deep in council space, surrounded by the strongest military forces in the galaxy. Nothing should have been able to reach it, let alone destroy it. Within an hour, all 12 council representatives had gathered in the emergency session chamber. The main viewing screen showed a star map of the Kepler system. Red markers indicated the locations where stations had been destroyed. There were too many red markers. "Report," ordered Zextai. His forearms crossed tightly over his chest. General Thokmer stepped forward, his massive frame more tense than Kethver had ever seen it. At 0315 this morning, the Kepler system came under attack by unknown forces. The enemy destroyed 17 mining platforms, 4 defense stations, and 12 patrol ships in less than 30 minutes. "The 30 minutes?" High Priestess Velshin's serpentine body coiled in disbelief. "That is impossible. The Kepler defenses were designed to hold off an entire fleet for weeks. The enemy used technology we do not recognize," General Thokmer continued. "Their ships changed tactics in the middle of battle. Our defensive computers could not adapt fast enough. Admiral Zothkar of the Zilithian Imperial Navy activated a holographic display. We managed to record the final minutes of the battle before our monitoring station was destroyed. I must warn you, this footage is disturbing." The hologram showed space around Kepler Prime. Zilithian defense ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns. It was textbook military strategy, executed flawlessly. Then the enemy appeared. The ships were like nothing Kethver had ever seen. They were black as the void between stars, with shapes that seemed to shift and change as they moved. They fought in ways that made no sense. When the Zilithian ships formed defensive lines, the enemy ships attacked from above and below. When the defenders tried to surround them, the enemy ships suddenly fought in single combat. Worst of all, the enemy adapted in real time. Every tactic the Zilithian forces used worked once, maybe twice. Then the enemy learned and found a counterattack. Our commanders followed all proper procedures, Admiral Zothkar said as the hologram showed another Zilithian ship exploding. They used strategies that have worked for centuries. But this enemy die fight like madmen. Kethver watched the battle with growing horror. The enemy ships moved in patterns that reminded him of something, but he could not place what it was. They fought with a creativity that was both brilliant and terrifying. "Do we know who they are?" asked Dr. Vexahan of the Mortaxi Research Division. "They sent one message," General Folkmore replied grimly. 3 words: "We are hegemony." Then they jumped away before our reinforcements could arrive. The chamber fell silent. The name meant nothing to any of them, but the message was clear. This was not a random pirate attack or a border skirmish. This was the opening move of something much larger. Over the following weeks, more attacks came. The enemy called themselves the Void Hegemony, and they struck at targets throughout Council space. Their ships appeared without warning, destroyed everything in sight, and vanished before help could arrive. Each attack was different from the last. Sometimes they used overwhelming force. Sometimes they used stealth and precision strikes. Sometimes they seemed to retreat, only to return and attack from an unexpected angle. The Council's military forces were designed to fight predictable enemies. Their computer systems analyzed enemy behavior and recommended counter-strategies based on historical data. But the Void Hegemony did not fight like any enemy in the databases. General Folkmore stood in the war room, staring at tactical displays that made less sense every day. His aide approached carefully. "Sir, the Gorloth Third Fleet reports another defeat at the Rigel system." General Folkmore closed his eyes. The Gorloth Third Fleet was one of his finest units. They had never lost a battle in 40 years of service. What happened? The enemy used a formation that our computers classified as tactically impossible. They attacked in 3 groups that should have been too far apart to support each other, but somehow they coordinated perfectly. How many ships did we lose? All of them, sir. General Folkmore had fought in wars for most of his life. He had faced enemies who were stronger, faster, and better equipped. But he had never faced an enemy who could not be understood. The Void Hegemony fought like humans used to fight. The thought hit him like a physical blow. He remembered battles from the old war, when human commanders had done things that made no sense. They had attacked when they should have defended. They had divided their forces when they should have concentrated them. They had won battles that no sane commander would have attempted, but these enemies were not human. The few ship fragments recovered from battle sites showed technology that was completely alien. The Void Hegemony was something else entirely, something that had learned to fight with human-like unpredictability. Dr. Vexahan reached the same conclusion while analyzing combat recordings in her laboratory. The enemy's tactics showed patterns that reminded her of human problem-solving methods. They tried solutions that should not work. They combined incompatible strategies. They adapted faster than any computer system could predict. She had worked with human scientists before the war. They had been infuriating partners who refused to follow proper procedures. But they had also been brilliant in ways that surprised her every day. Now the galaxy faced an enemy that combined alien technology with human-style creativity. It was the worst possible combination. Admiral Zothkar commanded the emergency fleet that was supposed to protect the core worlds. His ships were the finest in the galaxy, equipped with the most advanced weapons and shields. His crews were trained to perfection. None of it mattered. The Void Hegemony attacked his fleet near the Centauri system. Admiral Zothkar deployed his ships in the Zilithian Grand Formation, a strategy that had never failed in 800 years of warfare. The enemy ships ignored the formation completely. They attacked the flagship directly, breaking through escort ships as if they were not there. When Admiral Zothkar ordered a counterattack, the enemy ships scattered in all directions, forcing his fleet to chase them across the entire system. Then, when his ships were spread thin and confused, the enemy regrouped and destroyed them one by one. It was exactly the kind of tactic humans had used during the war. Unpredictable, illogical, and devastatingly effective. That night, Ambassador Kethver called an emergency session of the Council. For the first time in 5 years, the chamber was filled with fear instead of confidence. "We need new strategies," he said simply. "Our current military doctrine cannot handle this enemy. What do you suggest?" Zextai's forearms trembled with barely controlled rage. The Zilithian Empire had lost more ships in the past month than in the previous century. Kethver hesitated. What he was about to say would shock the entire council, but he could see no other choice. "We need to learn how to fight like humans did." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted over each other, refusing to consider such a shameful idea. They were civilized beings who fought with honor and tradition. They would not lower themselves to using chaotic human tactics. But as the reports kept coming in, as more fleets were destroyed and more worlds went silent, the voices of protest grew quieter. General Thokmer was the first to admit the truth that none of them wanted to face. The humans were the only ones who ever fought unpredictably. They were the only ones who could adapt in the middle of battle. "The humans are gone," High Priestess Velshin reminded him. "We made sure of that." "Yes," General Thokmer said quietly. "We did." As the meeting ended and the representatives returned to their quarters, Kethver stood alone in the chamber, staring at the star map. Red markers showed the locations of hegemony attacks. They formed a pattern that was moving slowly but steadily toward the core worlds. For the first time since the human exile, he wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. They had banished the only species in the galaxy that knew how to fight. Chaos with chaos. Now chaos was coming for them, and they had no idea how to stop it. 3 months after the first hegemony attack, the galaxy was burning. Ambassador Kethver stood in the council chamber, looking at a star map that showed more red markers than blue ones. 17 systems had fallen to the void hegemony. 43 major fleets had been destroyed. The death toll was climbing into the billions. The other council members sat in their chairs like broken shells of their former selves. Zextai's forearms hung limply at his sides. High Priestess Velshin had not moved in an hour. General Thokmer stared at nothing, his massive frame shaking with exhaustion. "The hegemony fleet is 3 days from Zilithian Prime," Admiral Zothkar reported in a voice that had lost all hope. "Our remaining forces cannot stop them." Zilithian Prime was one of the most heavily defended worlds in the galaxy. If it fell, the heart of Council space would be defenseless. The war would be over. Dr. Vexahan uncoiled from her position and accessed the central computer. "I have analyzed every battle recording we possess. The enemy adapts to our strategies within minutes. They learn from every engagement and become stronger." "There must be something we can do," Zextai said, but his words carried no conviction. Kethver stood up slowly. He had been dreading this moment for weeks, but now it was here. Time was running out, and desperate situations called for desperate measures. "There is one option we have not considered," he said quietly. The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to him. "We could ask the humans for help." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives jumped to their feet, shouting in a dozen different languages. Zextai's forearms waved frantically as he protested in rapid Zilithian. High Priestess Velshin hissed like an angry serpent. General Thokmer's roar shook the entire station. "Impossible," Zextai declared when the noise died down. "We exiled them. We signed the decree. We banished them to save the galaxy from their chaos," High Priestess Velshin added. "We cannot simply invite that chaos back." "The humans hate us," said Admiral Zothkar. "Even if we could find them, why would they help?" Kethver waited for the protest to end. Then he activated the star map again, showing the advancing hegemony forces. "Because if they do not help, there will be no galaxy left to save." The argument continued for hours. Some representatives refused to even consider the idea. Others worried that it was already too late. But as reports came in of more defeated fleets and destroyed worlds, the voices of opposition grew weaker. Finally, General Thokmur stood up. The massive Gorloth commander looked older than Kethver had ever seen him. "I fought humans for 20 years, he said slowly. "They were the most difficult enemy I ever faced. But they were also the most effective fighters in the galaxy. If anyone can stop the hegemony, it would be them." Dr. Vexahan nodded reluctantly. "Human tactics are the only ones that might work against an adaptive enemy." One by one, the other representatives began to agree. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice left. "How would we even find them?" asked Admiral Zothkar. "They disappeared beyond the Outer Rim 5 years ago. No one knows where they went." Kethver had been thinking about this problem for weeks. "We send a small, fast ship into the void. If the humans are still alive, they will find us. And if they are not alive?" Zextai asked. "Then we die with honor instead of dying in defeat." The vote was closer than Kethver had expected. 7 representatives voted yes, 5 voted no. It was enough. 3 days later, a single Thylorian scout ship left the council station and headed for the Outer Rim. Captain Morduk was one of Kethver's most trusted officers. If anyone could find the humans, it would be him. The ship crossed the boundary of known space and entered the void beyond. This was territory that no council vessel had ever explored. The stars were different here, arranged in patterns that did not appear on any map. For 2 weeks, Captain Mordek searched empty space, following sensor readings that might have been engine trails or might have been natural phenomena. He began to think the mission was hopeless. Then, on the 10th day, his ship was surrounded. They appeared out of nowhere, materializing from what seemed like empty space. 12 ships, but not like any ships Captain Mordek had ever seen. They were sleek and strange, built from materials that seemed to bend light around them. The communication channel crackled to life. "This is Commander Sarah Chun of the Human Free Fleet. You are in violation of the exile decree. State your business or prepare to be destroyed." Captain Mordek's hand shook as he opened the channel. "Commander Chun, this is Captain Mordek of the Thylorian Republic. I come with a message from the Galactic Council." There was a long pause. Then, "The Council exiled us, Captain. We have nothing to say to them." The galaxy is under attack," Captain Morduk said quickly, before the humans could cut the connection. "An enemy called the Void Hegemony is destroying everything. Billions are dead? If you do not help, everyone will die." Another pause, longer this time. "Follow us," Commander Chun said finally. "But any hostile action will result in your immediate destruction." The human ships moved in formation around Captain Morduk's vessel, escorting him deeper into the void. After 6 hours of travel, they reached something that took his breath away. It was a space station, but not like any station he had ever seen. It was built from 100 different ship designs, fused together into something that should not have been able to work, but somehow did. Zilithian hull plates were welded to Mortaxi energy cores. Gorloth armor plating protected Thalorian computer systems. Around the station, dozens of ships moved in patterns that made no sense but were somehow beautiful. The humans had taken technology from every species in the galaxy and combined it in ways that no engineer would have thought possible. "Welcome to Haven Station," Commander Chun said as Captain Morduk's ship was guided to a docking bay. "The first free city in the void." Captain Mordek was escorted through corridors that were unlike anything in council space. The walls were covered with art from a dozen different worlds. Children of various species played together in gardens that grew under artificial suns. Humans worked alongside Zilithians, Mortaxi, and even a few Gorloth. "How is this possible?" he asked his escort, a young human woman with scars on her face. "When the council exiled us, they also exiled everyone who disagreed with them," she explained. "Political prisoners, refugees, freethinkers. We found each other out here in the dark." They brought him to a conference room where 5 humans waited. Captain Morduk recognized Admiral Sarah Chun from the old war records. She was older now, her hair gray and her face lined with experience. But her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence that had made her humanity's greatest military commander. "Captain Morduk," she said, gesturing to a chair. "You said the galaxy is under attack, the void hegemony," he replied. "They fight like you used to fight. They adapt to our strategies in real time. They use tactics that make no sense but work anyway." Admiral Chun exchanged glances with the other. "Humans, show us." Captain Mordek activated his portable display and showed them recordings of hegemony battles. The humans watched in silence, their faces growing more serious with each destroyed council fleet. "This is not good," one of them said finally. "These enemies fight like us, but they have technology we have never seen. Can you help us?" Captain Mordok asked. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long time. Around the table, the other humans waited for her decision. "The council threw us away," she said. "Finally, they decided the galaxy was better off without us." "They were wrong," Captain Mordok said desperately. "They know they were wrong. That is why they sent me." "And what do they offer in return for our help?" Captain Mordek hesitated. The council had not discussed terms. They had been too proud to think about what they might need to give up. I do not know. I was only told to ask for your help." Admiral Chun smiled, but it was not a happy expression. "Of course they were." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the strange ships that moved around Haven Station. "Captain, we have built something here that the council could never understand. We have created a society where anyone can belong, regardless of their species or their past. We have combined the best ideas from every world and made them into something new." She turned back to face him. "Why should we give that up to save the people who threw us away?" Captain Mordek thought about Zilithium Prime, with its billions of innocent civilians. He thought about the Mortaxi colonies where children played in crystal gardens. He thought about all the worlds that would burn if the hegemony was not stopped. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. Admiral Chun studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "We will help," she said, "not for the council, not for the politicians who exiled us, but for the people who do not deserve to die for their leaders' mistakes." Captain Mordok felt relief flood through him. "Thank you." "Do not thank us yet," Admiral Chun warned. "When this is over, things will not go back to the way they were. The galaxy will have to change." "What do you mean?" Admiral Chun's smile was sharp as a blade. "The council wanted order without chaos. They wanted progress without change. They wanted victory without cost. They are about to learn that none of those things are possible." The human fleet arrived at Zilithium Prime. Just as the Void Hegemony began their final assault, Ambassador Kethver watched from the council station as two vastly different forces faced each other in the space around the planet. The hegemony ships moved like living shadows, shifting and changing as they attacked. The remaining council forces fought in perfect formations that were being torn apart by an enemy they could not understand. Then the humans entered the battle. Their ships did not move in formation. They scattered across the battlefield like thrown stones, each one following its own path. They attacked from impossible angles, retreated when they should have advanced, and regrouped in ways that made no tactical sense. It was exactly the kind of chaotic fighting that the Council had spent 50 years trying to eliminate from the galaxy, and it was working. How are they doing that? Admiral Zothkar stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. The hegemony adapts to every strategy we use, but they cannot adapt to the humans. Dr. Vexahan ran the battle data through every analysis program she possessed. The results made no sense. The humans are not using a strategy. They are using dozens of strategies at the same time. Every ship fights differently. On the main viewing screen, a human destroyer suddenly accelerated directly toward a hegemony battleship. The alien vessel tried to adapt, shifting its weapons to meet the threat. But at the last second, the human ship spun away and fired at the battleship's blind spot. Meanwhile, 3 human fighters were attacking a hegemony cruiser by flying in a pattern that looked like a child's drawing. The enemy ship's targeting computers could not predict where they would go next because there was no pattern to predict. "They fight like madmen," General Thokmer said with something that might have been admiration. "No," Kethver realized. "They fight like humans." The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Void Hegemony fleet was destroyed. Not a single alien ship escaped, but the cost had been terrible. Half the human fleet was gone. Hundreds of Council ships had been destroyed. The space around Zilithian Prime was filled with debris and the bodies of the dead. Admiral Sarah Chun's flagship limped toward the Council station, its hull scarred by enemy fire. She came aboard alone, wearing a simple uniform that showed the marks of battle. The Council representatives gathered to meet her in the main chamber. None of them seemed to know what to say. They owed their lives to this woman and her people, but admitting that was harder than they had expected. "Admiral Chun," Zextai began, his forearms moving uncertainly, "Dear, we are grateful for your assistance." Admiral Chen looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. "Your gratitude is noted." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, High Priestess Velshin spoke up. "What do you want in return for your help?" "Nothing," Admiral Chun replied. "We did not come back to serve the Council. We came back to save innocent lives." "Then you will return to the Void?" Dr. Vexahan asked hopefully. Admiral Chun smiled, and the expression was not reassuring. "No, we will not." General Folkmore stepped forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean the old order is finished," Admiral Chun said simply. "The Council system failed. It created the very chaos it was trying to prevent." "That is not true," Zextai protested. "We had 5 years of perfect peace before the hegemony attacked." "You had 5 years of stagnation," Admiral Chun corrected. "You eliminated everything that made the galaxy grow and change. You created a perfect order that could not adapt when real danger appeared." She walked to the star map that dominated the center of the chamber. The hegemony was not random. They were created by someone who understood exactly how rigid your military thinking had become. Someone who knew that you would be helpless against an enemy that fought like humans. The implications of her words sank in slowly. Kethver was the first to understand. "You think someone sent them?" "I think someone who knew about human tactics created an enemy specifically designed to destroy the Council," Admiral Chun said. "Someone who wanted to prove that order without chaos leads to death. Who would do such a thing?" High Priestess Velshin demanded. Admiral Chun shrugged. "Does it matter? The damage is done. The Council system has shown its weakness to the entire galaxy. Other enemies will come and they will use the same tactics." "Then you must help us again," Zextai said desperately. "No," Admiral Chun replied firmly. "We will not save you again. If the galaxy is to survive, it must learn to save itself." She turned to face the assembled representatives. "We are establishing free colonies throughout Council space. Any being who wants to escape the rigid hierarchies of their homeworld can join us. We will teach them to think for themselves, to adapt, to grow." "You are talking about revolution?" General Thokmer said. "I'm talking about evolution," Admiral Chun corrected. "The galaxy must change, or it will die. You can be part of that change, or you can be left behind." The Council members looked at each other with fear and uncertainty. Everything they had built, everything they believed in, was being challenged. "What if we refuse?" Zextai asked. Admiral Chun's expression did not change. "Then you refuse. We will not force you to join us, but we will not serve you either." She walked toward the exit, then paused. "Oh, and Ambassador Kethver, you are welcome to visit our colonies any time. You were the only one who seemed to understand what you were losing when you exiled us." After she left, the chamber erupted in angry discussion. Some representatives demanded that the humans be exiled again. Others worried about the free colonies that were being established in their territory, but Kethver said nothing. He was thinking about Admiral Chen's words about the price of perfect order. Over the following months, the galaxy began to change whether the Council wanted it to or not. Humans established colonies on dozens of worlds, welcoming refugees and dissidents from every species. These colonies became centers of innovation and creativity that the rigid council worlds could not match. Young beings left their homeworlds to join the human settlements. Artists and scientists flocked to places where they could experiment freely. Even some military officers abandoned their posts to learn the chaotic tactics that had defeated the hegemony. Dr. Vexahan was one of the first to visit a human colony. She found laboratories where Mortaxi scientists worked alongside human researchers, combining their different approaches to create breakthroughs that neither species could achieve alone. "This is how we used to work," she told her human colleague. "Before the war, before the exile, we accomplished amazing things together." "You can accomplish amazing things again," the human replied. "But only if you are willing to accept chaos as part of progress." General Thokmer visited Human Military Academy where young officers from a dozen species learned to think like human commanders. They were taught to break rules, to improvise, to find victory in situations that seemed hopeless. "This is not proper military doctrine," he told the human instructor. "Proper doctrine gets you killed," the instructor replied. "Flexible thinking keeps you alive?" Even High Priestess Velshin found herself drawn to human art galleries, where creators mixed traditional forms in ways that created entirely new expressions of beauty. "This should not work," she said while staring at a sculpture that combined Mortaxi crystal techniques with human metalworking. "But it does work," pointed out the human artist. "Beauty does not follow rules, it creates them." As the years passed, the galaxy began to split into two different civilizations. The old council worlds remained rigid and traditional, following the same patterns they had always followed. The human colonies grew wild and chaotic, constantly changing and adapting. The council worlds were safe and predictable. The human colonies were dangerous and alive. More and more beings chose the dangerous path. Kethver was the last council ambassador to visit Admiral Chun before she disappeared back into the void. He found her on a new colony world, watching children of a dozen different species play together in gardens that defied every rule of agricultural science. "You won," he told her. "The galaxy is changing the way you wanted it to." Admiral Chun shook her head. "We did not win anything. We just showed the galaxy what it was missing." "Will you stay now? Will you rejoin the galactic community?" "No," she said quietly. "Our place is in the void, exploring what lies beyond the edge of known space. But we will always be here when the galaxy needs to remember how to grow." She looked at the playing children, beings who would grow up thinking that cooperation between species was normal, that breaking rules was sometimes necessary, that change was not something to fear. "The galaxy exiled us to preserve their perfect order," she said. "But perfect order is death. Real life requires chaos, change, and the courage to try things that might not work." Kethver nodded slowly. "We thought we had won when we forced you to leave." "You did win," Admiral Chun replied. "You got exactly what you wanted. Perfect peace, perfect order, perfect predictability. And you learned that those things are not worth having if they cost you your soul." As Kethver prepared to leave Admiral, Chun gave him a final message for the council. "Tell them that the void is vast and full of wonders. Tell them that there are enemies out there far worse than humans ever were. And tell them that when those enemies come, they will need more than perfect order to survive." "What will they need?" Kethver asked.